Hello there. The third generation of the Pokemon games, in my opinion, is when the series really starts to shine. It's not a million miles away from the previous games in graphics or game mechanics, but with each new generation, clear steps are taken to improve what came before. And the steps they took here were pretty huge. Emerald released in the UK in the year 2005. That's a full 4 years after Crystal. And I remember getting Pokemon Sapphire and absolutely loving it. And at some point, I also got my hands on Emerald. Although I didn't find this one like I did with Crystal. I'd remember that. No, at this point in my life, I was about, say, 12 years old and gaming had truly sunk its teeth into me. So it wasn't uncommon for me to exclusively get games for birthdays and Christmases. Also, I was a frequent visitor to a second-hand tech store known to the public as Cash Generator. But to me, it was more commonly referred to as heaven. In this store, you can find tons of second-hand games, consoles, and other bits and bobs. Everything I hold dear to this day, so there's a good chance I got it from there. Either way, even though I can't remember how I came about having it, I do remember the day I didn't have it anymore. I was on the bus with my dad, Game Boy Advance SP in hand, and Emerald safely inserted inside. Ever since I started playing Pokemon back in the day with Yellow, I took my handhelds everywhere with me. And because of this, I had to be extra careful with my consoles. They were more important to me than anything, family included. But no matter how much you love something in life, there's always a chance you might just leave it on the bus. My best guess is it must have fallen out of my pocket or something when we were getting up to get off the bus. And I still remember the fear I felt when I put my hand in my pocket and I didn't feel the sweet sensation of touching an electronic device. I searched frantically in every pocket multiple times, and realising what had happened, I decided to tell my dad, hoping he could help me get it back. Surprisingly, he wasn't mad or anything like that, and obviously it was too late to get it back, the bus was long gone. Instead, he just kind of told me a story about a time in the long ago when he was a kid and he left his favourite toy truck on the bus. The same sort of situation I was in. And I guess he was trying to help me understand that these things happen sometimes and it's not the end of the world. But fuck that, I never got to finish the game. And on top of that, I lost my Game Boy too. Not just any Game Boy either, it was the Game Boy Advance SP with the totally radical tribal on top. For me, this was the end of the world. I still had Sapphire, but I remember not being able to play that either until a year or two later when the Nintendo DS released and I was able to get one. But at that point, I was just looking forward to the next generation. But enough trauma dumping for one day, I suppose. So just like Crystal, today we're going to be looking at another Pokemon game I never got to finish. Pokemon Emerald. As always, I'd like to mention I will be looking at these games from the point of view of the average person, in the hopes of finding out if an average player's experience is indeed an average experience. To help me break down my thoughts on the game, we're going to be looking at the following 5 things. Number 1, the story and the setting. Number 2, how the game plays. Number 3, the characters. Number 4, how the game performs. And number 5, I'm going to be finishing everything off with my conclusion. Now again, I'd like to recommend going back and watching my previous videos on Pokemon Yellow and Crystal if you haven't watched them already, as this is the third video in a series. I'm going to be comparing each game from the last, and I explain the game mechanics and how the series functions in more detail in a video I made for Yellow. Although I will be pointing out and highlighting differences as they appear. Also, I should mention that if you want to play this game yourself, I'm going to be vague about certain things when I can, so there's still plenty for you to discover. But obviously there will be spoilers, so you have been warned. With all that out of the way, I'd like to say a quick thank you for watching, and let's start this video. Before we begin, we once again get the choice to play as either a boy or a girl, which was added in the last generation and will be available to us for the remainder of the series. Once we make our choice and name our character, we start our journey how some children end theirs. In the back of a van. Although, instead of being delivered to Epstein's Island, the van stops and we jump out in front of our new home in Little Root Town, which is situated in the region of Hoenn. So right off the bat, it's a little different to the previous 2 games we've covered. Thumbs up from me. Our mum meets us outside, welcoming us home, before bringing us indoors to show us our new crib. As you can see, there's a couple of Pokemon inside that are handling the move, adding to the sense that people and Pokemon coexist. Pokemon aren't just pets or animals we make kill each other. No, they actually work for us too, and probably for free. Don't you just love slavery? Seriously though, taking real world logic out of it, I think it's pretty cool seeing this. But do you want to know what's even cooler in this game? Now we have a dad. That's right, ladies and ladyboys, Mum tells us that our dad has bought us a new clock as a housewarming gift, so we're sent to our room to set the time. But don't get your hopes up, because even though we now have a dad who bought us a fancy new clock, there is no day and night cycle in this generation. Now, taking away one of the best features from the previous generation, in my opinion, is a huge disappointment. I'll point out the significance of the time being set later, so just you wait. Heading back downstairs, our mum calls us quickly to come see what's on the TV, although we missed what she wanted to show us. She explains that it was a news report from a place called Petalburg Town, and they were reporting outside of the city's gym. She was hoping to see our dad there, for some reason. Wink. But we must have missed it. However, she tells us that one of our dad's friends lives in our new hometown, a man named Professor Birch. She then urges us to go introduce ourselves to him for some weird reason. So we head on over to the lab next door, because that's how all these games start. But once we get there, we are told by one of his assistants that Birch is out doing field research, and he isn't one for desk work and prefers being out and about, which I like, not only because we as a player don't feel like we're doing a nerd or an old man's job for them, but because it matches the full of life vibe of the game itself. But with that information, we head on out to look for him and come across his house. Unfortunately though, again, he isn't here, but his wife informs us that their daughter is home, so we should go say hi to her instead. We go into her room, but she's not around. So we read her diary, and upon spotting a Pokeball in her room, we try and steal it, but she catches us. So we get sent to little boy prison, and that's the end of the game. Don't touch a girl's Pokeballs, kids, it's rude. Being that I'm a grown man sneaking around a little girl's bedroom in a game, kinda feel like I should be going to big boy prison too. Anyway, that doesn't happen obviously, because they'll never catch me. And understandably a little confused, she asks us who the hell we are, and considering she just found a random person in her bedroom, she greets us in a rather nice manner, telling us her name is May and that she is glad to meet us, because her dad mentioned that we were moving here and she'd like to be friends. Pretty cute. But then things get a little bit weird when she says,
"Oh, this is silly, isn't it? I've just met you, Tam. Hee.
What the fuck? Cutting our extremely romantic introduction short, she remembers she was supposed to go help her dad catch wild Pokemon, so she logs onto her PC. Maybe she has an emulator of Crystal installed on there. But if I know women, she's most likely just telling the other boys she wants to be their friends also. After exiting their home, we notice a young girl standing at the entrance to the town, and she tells us she can hear the cries of scary Pokemon out there. So we agree to go and investigate for her. But when we do, we found out that the cries were actually coming from a man being chased by a Pokemon, which is pretty funny, I'm not gonna lie. He shouts for help and asks us to take a Pokeball out of his bag in order to get rid of the scary Pokemon chasing him. And this is when we get to choose our starter. In Emerald, we get the choice between Torchic, Mudkip, and Treecko. Torchic is a little fire chicken thing. Mudkip is apparently based on a mud puppy, whatever the fuck that is. And Treecko is a little gecko creature. Personally, I find this to be one of the hardest choices in starters, if not the hardest. I love all the starters in this generation, and their final evolutions are all fantastic. But this time around, for nostalgia's sake, I'm going to go with Mudkip. And with Mudkip by our side, we have to save the damsel in distress by entering our first battle. I haven't mentioned the improvement in graphics yet, and I'm going to talk about them in more depth later on, so I'll quickly just say this is what I was talking about earlier when I said this is when Pokemon games really started to shine. The little animations introduced in Crystal? The little animations introduced in Crystal are back, not just for the Pokemon, but for us now too. The colours and the details in the Pokemon are great, but I'll cover all that in more detail later. After crushing this innocent little Zigzagoon into the floor, the man reveals himself to be Professor Birch. He says our dad told him everything about us and that he knows we still don't have our own Pokemon yet. Going on to say that he's quite surprised because, and I quote, "But the way you battled earlier, you pulled it off with aplomb." I refuse to Google what this means. It must be something good though, because he thanks us for helping him earlier by letting us keep the Mudkip we used in the battle. So off we go on an adventure with Mudkip. First we pass through Oldale Town, visiting their Pokemon Center, saying hi to Nurse Joy, obviously, and then buying a few potions from their Pokemart. Then, a little further up the road, we bump into May again, who offers to battle us in order to give us a taste of what trainer battles are really like. This acts as our little tutorial for trainer battles, and she uses a Treecko and we handle her pretty easily before running back to the lab together. And when we get there, Birch presents us with a Pokédex to help us along the way. I've already covered what a Pokédex is in my previous videos, so a quick summary is that it's a device that records information on Pokemon we have captured and seen. May also gives us some Pokeballs to get ourselves started, which is pretty cool. And if you haven't figured it out by now, May is going to be our main rival for this game. But I'd understand if you haven't picked up on that though, considering the last two games our main rivals have been a bit of a... Moving on. As we leave the lab, we then bump into our mum, who is sitting outside of our house, and she gives us what is quite possibly the most important gift of all time. Running shoes. Yes, we can now finally Naruto run in a Pokemon game. So off we go, running into the sunset. Along our path, we battle some trainers that add a new member to our team. We also come across some berries growing at the side of the road, orange berries and pecha berries. These will be more important later, although for the time being we can use them to heal our Pokemon if we need to. Just after this, we reach our first major location in the game, Petalburg City. And if you remember, earlier our mum said that our dad should be at the gym here, so I go looking. And upon walking into the gym, we are greeted by none other than the man himself, our first Pokemon dad. He is pleased to see that we have our own Pokemon now, and as we chat, a young boy walks in asking if he can help us get his first Pokemon too. His name is Wally, and he tells us that he's going to be moving to a new town soon. So our dad agrees to help him by loaning him a Pokemon to use while we accompany him to catch one for himself. We take a short walk into the tall grass and he finds one, a Pokemon named Ralts. Just like our battle with May, this interaction acts as our tutorial for catching wild Pokemon. Wally has a quick battle, swings his feeble little arm and throws a Pokeball at Ralts, successfully capturing his first Pokemon. This little moment when he realizes he actually did it is pretty heartwarming, I'm not gonna lie. No cap on fleek, as the kids say. We then wander back to our dad, who thanks us for helping out. Wally is going to act as another kind of rival just like May, however we won't see him throughout our story as much as we see May. But it's kind of cool that we have two rivals or friends this time around, because in real life most kids have multiple friends, you know. So it would make sense that you'd have multiple people to compete against and grow with as you progress through life. Wally leaves and then our dad tells us that now we have our own Pokemon, we should take on the gym leader challenge. He explains that he's the gym leader himself, so we will battle him someday, although we will have to become stronger first. He points us in the direction of Rustaboro Town, and this is the introduction to Emerald. In my opinion, it's the best one yet. It focuses more on what you're going to be doing, unlike the previous games. Yellow didn't exactly have an informative introduction, and Crystal had us collecting an egg. But as always, there's plenty more to do and talk about. So let's have a look at the gym leaders. The first gym leader we take on is Roxanne in Rustboro, and Roxanne uses rock-type Pokemon. I like her character design and I think she's pretty cool, and she has a similar thing going on that Jasmine did, being that she uses rock-type Pokemon, but she's like a young schoolgirl. Another cool thing about her character is that she talks about how she needs to pay more attention in school, and the trainer school she's talking about is in the city we're in, adding a little extra layer of environmental detail to her character. Next, we have Broly. Not really though, his name is Brawly and he uses fighting type Pokemon. He's pretty much what you would get if you ordered Broly off a Wish. Located in Dewford Town, his gym challenge includes a dark maze. To begin with, you can only see a small circle around your character and you need to battle the other trainers in his gym to light the way forward. It relates to what you will be doing on the island his gym is located on, so it'll make sense if you play the game yourself. Third on our list is Watson, an energetic old man who is far too happy if you ask me. Using electric type Pokemon, his gym is found in Mauville City. His little gym gimmick reminds me of the one back in Surge's gym in Kanto for some reason. Even though they're pretty different, you just have to step on switches to unlock electric doors, battle some trainers, and then battle against Watson himself. It's a decent enough little puzzle, but the best is still to come. Next is Flannery, the fire-type gym leader. Found in Lava Ridge Town, her puzzle isn't my favourite. You just fall through pits and pop out somewhere else in the gym, either closer to the leader or in a battle with some other trainer. It's not bad, but it's not great either. The best part about her is that she tries to act tough and intimidate you because she thinks that's what she's supposed to do, being that she's just been newly appointed as the gym leader. But by the end of her battle, she learns to accept who she is and decides to just be herself instead. I think that's a cool little bit of character growth in like a really short amount of time. The fifth gym leader on our journey is back in Petalburg City, and this time we are facing off against our dad, Norman. Norman uses normal type Pokemon, and his gym challenge is one of my favourites. You're presented with 2 doors and you get to choose which door you go through. Each door leads to a trainer with a different strategy in mind. You do that a few times before finally getting to show normal Norman your progress as a trainer. After beating him, he shares some kind words with you, and it's a cool moment between father and son. It's not something we get a lot of in these games, unfortunately. After that heartwarming moment, we find our next leader in Four Tree City. This place is a literal city of tree houses, and it reminds me of the Ewok village in Star Wars. Nestled in the middle of the city is a gym led by Winona, the flying type leader. You have to do a relatively simple wall pushing puzzle, and it's nothing special, but it's still kind of fun. Winona herself has a pretty cool design, but the fact she doesn't use an Ewok as a Pokemon is a real letdown. The 7th step on our road to the league is by far my favourite gym leader in the game. Or should I say gym leaders, because in this game, we have 2 opponents at the same time. Yes, if you didn't know already, Pokemon Emerald was the game that introduced double battles into the series. Now instead of one-on-one battles all the time, we can face trainers in 2-on-2 battles as well. Tate and Liza are twins who use psychic Pokemon in Moss Deep City. The worst part of their gym is the warp puzzles you have to do on the way to them, but I can forgive that because I enjoy double battles. Also, the city they are in is on an island which has a literal space rocket on it. So that has to count for something. The 8th and final gym is against a rather fashionable man named Juan in Sutopolis City. Juan uses water-type Pokemon, although his gym contains a puzzle using ice flooring. But this ice isn't one you can slide across. Basically, you have to walk on the ice without stepping on the same tile twice, otherwise you will fall through the floor into a room below that contains, say it with me, other trainers. This is by far my favourite puzzle for some reason. A little bit of history is that Juan was actually the old leader of the gym, but the leader we should have been facing had some business to attend to, so Juan came back in the meantime to cover their position. He has a decent design and a cool backstory, and the fact that I wanted this gym puzzle to last longer, I think it can only be seen as a good thing. And there we have it. We have all of our gym badges and we are finally ready to take on the Pokemon League. Although before we get to that, I'm going to talk about 2 rival environmental groups first. Team Aqua and Team Magma. We get involved in their opposing plans early on in the game, and throughout we battle against both teams multiple times. Team Aqua, led by a man named Archie, plans on using the power of Kyogre, an ancient legendary Pokemon, to expand the seas so that water Pokemon have more room to swim, I guess. And Team Magma, led by Maxie, plan on using the power of Groudon, a different legendary Pokemon, to erupt volcanoes in order to expand the Earth's landmass, so people in Pokemon have more room to live, or something. There's actually a Team Magma grunt that says she can't wait for the landmass to increase so she can have her own house, which I can relate with. Kinda wish Groudon would f***ing do that here. Anyway, both teams acquire mysterious orbs which are supposed to grant them the ability to control the ancient Pokemon they are trying to awaken. And doing everything we can, we aren't enough to stop either team from achieving their goals, and the power of the ancient Pokemon they have awoken is far too great for us alone. What they didn't foresee happening, however, was that the orbs they acquired in order to control the Pokemon don't actually work. Because of this, Kyogre and Groudon's power start to cause issues around the region. It rains heavily in some areas and the sun gets extremely hot in others. On top of that, the two begin to battle one another. So left with no other option, we ourselves have to awaken a third ancient Pokemon, one that is said to have appeared long ago in order to calm the two legendary beasts as they battled back then the same way they are battling now. And this Pokemon is called Rayquaza. Groudon is the god of the land, Kyogre is the god of the sea, and Rayquaza is the god of the sky. And all this leads to the single coolest cutscene I have ever witnessed in a Pokemon game. After all this plays out, Archie and Maxie see that their plans were misled and they part ways, no consequences, nothing. Just a my bad. But all in all, I think it's a decent attempt at injecting some kind of story into the games. People act like it's the worst story ever in a game and it makes no sense, but if you spend more than 2 minutes on the internet, you're gonna see and hear some shit you wouldn't believe would ever happen. Also, it's a fantasy story set in a Pokemon universe, in a game made for children. If you're fine with accepting a little yellow mouse shooting electricity from its tail but take issue with environmental terrorism using similar creatures, then I don't know what to tell you. Either way, the payoff with the cutscene of Rayquaza flying down from the clouds was worth playing the game for me. The reason I wanted to talk about Team Aqua and Team Magma now was because this all happens before you enter the league, and you're able to catch Rayquaza before you take them on. And that's exactly what I did, but I'll explain more about that after we talk about the Hoenn Pokemon League. First off, we have Sydney, a hipster punk rock kinda guy who uses dark type Pokemon because it's totally rad. Yeah. He uses a Mightyena, a Shiftray, Cacturne, Crawdaunt, and one of my favourite Pokemon from this generation, a level 49 Absol. Continuing the darker theme, next we have Phoebe, a surfer chick who uses ghost type Pokemon. Perhaps there's some kind of cultural difference I'm missing here, but Hawaii and ghosts don't instantly match up in my head. Anyway, she uses Dusclops, Banette, Sableye, another Banette, and her highest level is yet another Dusclops at level 51. Third is Glacia, who to me looks like a posh tarot card reader. Very fancy indeed, yes. She uses Ice-type Pokemon and her team is Celio, Glalie, another Celio, another Glalie, and a Walrein at level 53. Next we have a badass pirate sailor guy called Drake. No, not that one. Drake uses Dragon Pokemon and he does not have any beef with Kendrick Lamar. His team consists of Shelgon, Altaria, Kingdra, Flygon, and his highest level Pokemon is a Salamence at level 55. I think his team is pretty cool and it showcases a nice mixture of dragon types, something that's been lacking so far in this series. Once we've defeated the Elite Four, we finally get our chance to challenge the champion of the region, Wallace. Introduced to us earlier in the story by a guy named Steven, who I'll talk about soon by the way, Wallace was the former gym leader in Sootopolis City. He also helps us locate Rayquaza, before running away and leaving a child to deal with a legendary dragon type Pokemon. It's not like he's one of the strongest trainers in the region or anything. Anyway, this fancy lad uses water type Pokemon and his team is Wailord, Tentacruel, Ludicolo, Whiscash, Gyarados, and my absolute favourite Pokemon from this generation, a level 58 Milotic. There's not much to say about this guy other than he was the former leader of Sootopolis City. He was around at the end of the game while all the chaos was kicking off, but he did nothing to help. And I personally think Steven is a better fit for the role as champion here. We bump into him early on in the game and a few more times throughout our journey. He helps us battle Team Magma, but again, no one really bothers to help us with the legendary Pokemon, arguably the hardest part of the story. In my opinion, it detracts from the epic nature of the story they were trying to tell here. The world is at stake, but the strongest trainers all just stand by the sideline, letting a kid do all the heavy lifting. It would have been cool if they all tried their best to battle them, but got defeated and we ended up jumping in and saved the day. I mean, it's a shame, but it is what it is. We've defeated the Elite Four, finished off the champion, and finally, we are initiated into the Hoenn Hall of Fame. The credits roll and we are done with our journey. Or are we? After watching the credits, which are great by the way, we wake up in our bedroom back home and head downstairs. Mum and Dad are there waiting for us and we have a quick chat with our dad before he goes back to his gym. And then we notice a breaking news story on the TV. There's been reports of a mysterious Pokemon flying around Hoenn and our mum asks us what colour it was because she didn't hear that part of the broadcast. Here we get a choice to answer either red or blue, and I answer red. So now it's time to talk about the legendary Pokemon. In Hoenn, there is a whopping 12 legendary Pokemon available, 9 new and 3 from the previous generations. First we'll start off with the obvious one, Rayquaza. Found at the top of the Sky Pillar at level 70, I can imagine Rayquaza could present a pretty tough challenge to newer players, although if you did enough snooping around in Team Aqua's base earlier in the story, you would have found yourself a Master Ball. It's advised by people online to use the Master Ball on a Pokemon I'm yet to talk about, but I used it here, like a tit. Next on our to-do list is Kyogre and Groudon, only available after we beat the Elite Four. We have to go to a place called the Weather Institute to know where to locate them. They both appear at level 70, just like Rayquaza. It's a quest that requires a few extra steps, but trust me, the worst is still to come. Because the next 3 are by far the most needlessly difficult to find Pokemon without a guide. Regirock, Registeel and Regice are 3 ancient Pokemon that sleep in separate locations. I initially wrote down an entire step-by-step guide on how to get them, but it made this section way longer than it had to be, so I'm going to link a guide on how to catch them below. I will say though, it includes having to be able to read Braille. Because of course you can. After following the guide online and catching them all, I figured there must have been something that I missed. Surely there was someone that teaches you how to read Braille somewhere and I just missed them. So I looked it up online and it brought back a memory when I saw this picture. There isn't an NPC that teaches you. The Braille alphabet was in the physical manual included with the game, and this is how I got them in Sapphire way back then. But if you don't have the manual or you're emulating the game, then you're going to have to look it up online, but I'd recommend just following a guide instead. As cool as it is trying to add a hidden puzzle into the game for them, I think this may have been just a tad too much. Okay, so we've talked about 6 legendary Pokemon so far. There's 6 left to talk about, but only one of them will be available to the majority of people listening. So let's talk about the one we are guaranteed to find. Remember when I chose red for the mysterious Pokemon flying around Hoenn? Well, the point of choosing the colour is actually the choice of Pokemon you're able to catch here, either Latias or Latios. If you choose red, you can find Latias, and if you choose blue, then you can find its counterpart, Latios. Latias and Latios are roaming Pokemon just like our good old friends Entei and Raikou from the last game. So this is what people advised me to keep my Master Ball for, but I just saw it too late. And they were probably right. It can be a pain to find, so I'd probably just follow a guide online to make your time trying to find and catch it a little easier. Unfortunately, that's all that's available to us mere mortals. Although if you are an ethereal being with time travelling abilities, then you can go back and attend Nintendo events at the time. This would allow you to get the remaining Latios, Mew from Generation 1, Ho-Oh and Lugia from Generation 2, and finally a Pokemon called Deoxys, which has 4 forms: normal, attack, defense, and speed. And that's it for the legendary Pokemon in Emerald, and the end of our story. There are optional things to do like contests and the Battle Frontier. Contests have you compete in different categories with your Pokemon to wow judges and a crowd of spectators. They're actually pretty fun and I loved them when I was a kid. I even beat one with my Gardevoir for this video, just so I could show you. You're welcome. And the Battle Frontier is just a range of different challenge battles with conditions. They aren't really my cup of tea, so I only tried a couple of them. So if you're interested and you're going to play the game, I'll leave you to find out what they are like for yourself. You can also take on Steven, the guy I said should be the champion. Now I didn't even know about this battle. I just stumbled upon him by chance in a cave when I was looking around for anything I might have missed. And it's a great battle too. Like, he has a stacked team of Pokemon all over level 70, just like Red in the last game. He uses a Skarmory, Claydol, Aggron, Cradily, Armaldo, and a Metagross. Like I was saying, it feels similar to the battle with Red, being that's the ultimate battle of the region with stupidly high level Pokemon. And with that, the game ends with a bang. That's everything for the story and the side content in Emerald. So, with all that said, let's finally move on to number 2, how the game plays. In many ways, Emerald is leaps and bounds ahead of the previous 2 games we covered, although the game mechanics haven't exactly changed all that much in my eyes. There's probably a bunch of balancing issues that were improved upon, but the battle system is pretty much identical to the last. Unless you're digging deep into it, the average person isn't going to notice much change. The biggest changes, however, are the way you use HMs and the double battle systems that have been added in this generation. First, it's a lot easier to use HMs now, and the animations look better than ever. In cases where you need to use Cut, Rock Smash, Strength and Surf, you just need to interact with the object instead of going into your Pokemon list and manually pressing it. Little quality of life changes like these are always appreciated. Many have been implemented, and if you're paying attention, you'll notice them. Second, the double battles are extremely functional and add a much needed bit of extra spice to the battles, because after hours of playing these games, the battles can get a little stale. You'll find them all over the region. There are some battles that are always double battles, but some trainers can be battled alone, or you can wait for them to look at each other before stepping in the middle and taking them on together. This saves time, which is always a godsend for an old man like me. Also, it allows for players to choose what kind of battle they want to take part in. It's not all fantastic though, because every game has flaws, and the biggest one for me is the item bag still gets full pretty quickly. It still has the same style of bag as the one in Crystal. It has different components for different items, but it still fills up and you'll have to drop stuff off at the computer storage or sell things you're not going to be using. In Crystal, we had this thing called the Poke Gear, and this held our phone and a map, and we have a similar thing added in Emerald. Although in this game it's called the Pokenav. It similarly holds our phone and a map. The phone is annoying, just like before. You'll get calls from trainers you battled all the time, but it also has a cool function where a little icon will appear next to their name, signifying that they are ready for a rematch. The map is better to look at this time around, however, and you can even zoom into areas to see what is there once you've visited it. But the Pokenav also has another function called Condition. This essentially is used for Pokemon contests. It shows you 5 different stats: cool, beautiful, tough, smart and cute. To increase these stats, you need to collect berries around the region in order to create Pokeblocks that you feed to your Pokemon. Pokeblocks are made in a berry blender, and this acts as a fun little mini game where you have to press a button at the right time to keep the blender spinning. Each stat has a different colour, and the blocks will be assigned a different colour depending on the colour of the berries used to create them. Colour, colour, colour. I'm not a pro at this kind of thing, but I do enjoy the contests. I think they're pretty good. So let's have a look at contests themselves. Each Pokemon can learn a total of 4 moves to use inside a battle. But if you check your Pokemon summary, you can see an added section. This shows you what type each move is during a contest. So my Gardevoir mainly has smart contest moves, so I just fed her as much greenish Pokeblocks I could to increase the smart stat. There is better ways to do it, but that's what I did. Then I entered the lowest ranked smart contest. They can be quite challenging if you're just playing these through trial and error. You have to pay more attention to what your moves can do and what the opponents have done. You go up against 3 different NPCs, each taking your turn to wow the judges, and depending on how well you perform, you will be ranked at the end of a few rounds. They can be quite fun, and I'd recommend giving them a good try if you play Emerald. If you win a contest, your Pokemon even gets a little ribbon for their efforts. Also, these stats can have an effect on evolution, so let's have a quick look at that. On the topic of contests affecting evolution, this only applies to one Pokemon in Emerald, and I'm of course talking about this beautiful little creature, Feebas. Wait, I know. It looks like a block of cheese and a fish had a baby. But when you increase Feebas's beauty stat enough and then level it up, it evolves into Milotic. It's worth it. And Milotic is arguably one of the best additions to this generation, if not of all time. We of course still have evolution stones. For example, we have a new Pokemon named Skitty who needs a Moonstone to evolve into a Delcatty. But they added a really cool and kind of weird evolution into this game also. There's this Pokemon known as Nincada that evolves into Ninjask. Although if you have an empty space in your party, when you evolve Nincada and then you check your party afterwards, you won't have an empty space anymore. The once empty space will be occupied by the shaded skin of the Nincada, which itself is occupied by a ghost, and this weird little Pokemon is called Shedinja. I think unique little inclusions like this are perfect for the Pokemon series. Like, I can only imagine how many kids freaked out when this happened to them without them planning it. And that's all I can really think about for new kinds of evolution in this game. Another added feature to Emerald was the bike. What's that I hear you scream? Tam, there was bikes in the last 2 games? I hate you so much even though you're unbelievably handsome. First, I'd like to say, calm down. Secondly, there's plenty for me to go around. Just like there's plenty of stuff I'm going to miss or forget to mention. But this time around, there are 2 bikes, so technically they did add a bike to this game. So if you did say you hated me, you can apologise in the comments and I'll take your apology into consideration. Here we have a choice between either the Mac bike and the Acro bike. The Mac bike is a bike that go fast, and the Acro bike lets you do bunny hops and sick wheelies. They are both extremely useful in different ways. First, I chose the Acro bike because I like doing wheelies, but at certain points of the game you will have to go back to the bike shop you got it from to change to the other bike. It's free to switch, but it's a little bit annoying. The Mac bike lets you cycle up steep, slippery hills, and it also lets you safely glide over cracked floors like the ones found in Sky Pillar. That's if you can control the thing, and the acro bike allows you to cross narrow beams, bunny hop over these little stone things, and it makes you look like a badass. It's a good idea, it's just a little irritating having to switch all the time. And I almost forgot to talk about the base building stuff too, so I'll go over it quickly. Somewhere along the line you get a TM called Secret Power, which allows you to build bases in trees, bushes, and these little holes and rock faces. You can decorate them, but I forgot to actually get into it as it's a side activity and I was focused on the storyline. So if you ever do play this game, make sure you give it a try. And I think that's it from what I can remember. Again, if there's anything I've missed, write it in the comments along with your apology for thinking I'm handsome. Or just give me some suggestions on how I can improve. And then like the video. And then subscribe. And while you're doing that, I'm going to move on to number 3, the characters. If you were to compare Pokemon Emerald to Pokemon Yellow and then ask me who the better cast was, I'd probably side with Yellow. But if you asked me the same question and you were comparing Emerald to Crystal, I'd say Emerald wins easily. I get that I'm certainly biased with my views here because I grew up right when Pokemon was just beginning, so the first generation is kind of like my safe space. But if you remember in the previous video, I said that Silver in the second generation was my favourite game for a long time. So it's important to recognise that I'm not talking about the Pokemon in these cases, I'm just talking about the people, the characters and their motivations. But we'll have a look at the Pokemon after we've covered the main cast. There are probably instances where I'd side with Crystal over Emerald, but in the context of characters, Emerald has it beat hands down. I just love the over-the-top nature of this game. The developers really leaned into the fantastical side of this universe. It's a place where gods literally exist and battle each other, and there's 2 rival organizations causing trouble for people while believing that they're doing good. But let's start from the start and make our way back to this point. First of all, why is this the first and last Pokemon game to have a dad for our protagonist? Spoilers, I guess. It's just a strange thing for them to always include into the game. Norman is a pretty cool character, and the fact he is a gym leader is a fantastic idea. It also pointed out to me that our mum in these games doesn't really get much of a character either. She's always just the devoted mother who is seen and not heard, other than our mum and Crystal. That wouldn't stop blowing up my phone. I think having 2 parents who are present could potentially distract you from the story, and not everyone is going to like that kind of dynamic. And there are of course cultural differences regarding gender roles, which I'm not going to get into here. I mean, I'd like to last more than 5 minutes on this platform. I just think it's a shame the kind of treatment that the parents get in these games. Our rivals this time around are also a step ahead of the competition in this game. On one hand, you have the fiery May, a girl who is always one step ahead on the journey, but doesn't take her time to train as hard as you and always falls short when it comes to battles. Eventually she realizes she's not going to be able to keep up with you in battles, so dedicates her time to catching more Pokemon than you instead. She's kind, helpful, and feels more like a friend you're competing with instead of a person you are supposed to hate, and for me it's a breath of fresh air, because in real life I hate so many people that sometimes it's nice to actually like people for once. And then on the other hand, you have Wally, a sickly boy that you help to catch his very first Pokemon. After the generosity you show him and the beatdown you give him and his Pokemon when he asks for a battle, he becomes inspired by you and your Pokemon to become stronger himself. It's said that because of where he moves to and the cleaner air, this helps him become stronger and heal his sickness. But I like to believe it's a combination of that and the motivation he feels to keep up with you and to one day hopefully surpass you as a trainer is what helps him get healthy. Next, I'd like to mention that Birch isn't my favourite professor in the series. Big Daddy Oak still holds that title, but I like his character a lot. He's just a guy. Some might even call him an average guy. He prefers being outdoors doing his research instead of being stuck inside a lab, and I think that's a nice change from Crystal. Next, I'd like to say a few things about Steven. First, we meet Steven lurking around in a cave like Gollum for Lord of the Rings because we have to deliver a letter to him. And throughout the story, he pops up here and there to help you deal with Team Magma and Team Aqua. He's this very stoic guy who loves rocks and fossils, and I was under the impression that he was going to be the champion at the end. Now obviously we have covered the fact that the fancy lad Wallace was actually the champion. And that got me thinking. I was going a little crazy because in the back of my mind I was certain that the champion back when I played Sapphire was Steven. So I googled it, and yes, he was in fact the champion in both Ruby and Sapphire. I think he's a better fit for the champion over Wallace, but we do get to have a real championship worthy battle with him after the league anyway. He's a cool character, and I think the game would be worse without him in it. I do think the gym leaders in this game were more memorable than the ones in Crystal were, but I prefer the league back in Crystal. Even though half of them were returning characters from Yellow, Emerald's League just doesn't do it for me. I did like the punk rock man's red mohawk though. Team Magma and Team Aqua were pretty well known in the Pokemon fan base as being ridiculous with a nonsensical motivation for what they are doing, but I don't think they are that bad, to be honest. I don't think it's unreasonable for environmental extremists in a universe that has animals that can affect the weather to try and use them to make their dreams a reality. We live in a world where people do all kinds of crazy stuff in the name of environment and climate change and all that cool stuff. So for me, it's not out of the realms of possibility for even worse things to happen in the Pokemon universe. If we had large creatures like Kyogre and Groudon in our reality, you better believe the governments all over the world would be trying to use them as weapons of war. So why would you not think terrorists would try and do the same thing? Overall, I think the story is good for a Pokemon game. The motivations don't make much sense to me because I'm not a crazy person, but the scene with Rayquaza coming down and camming Kyogre and Groudon is top tier, and I'm glad I played the game even just for that moment alone. Speaking of which, let's have a look at the Pokemon. The third generation added 135 new monsters to find and collect, and again, they 100% nailed it. I purposely made sure to use Pokemon only added in this generation instead of reverting back to older ones, and it was surprisingly easy to do. I really wanted to use Vileplume because I always have and I always will use Vileplume if it's available in order to catch tougher monsters, but instead I decided to try newer options like Breloom. But that didn't really pan out the way I hoped it would, so I boxed him and I focused on using Gardevoir instead. Everyone will have their favourites, but here are some of mine. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I think the starters in this game are fantastic, and I find it difficult to choose which one to use. The only two I don't like are Combuskin and Marshtomp, but I tend to focus on the beginning and the end of the evolution line anyway. Mudkip was the first starter that I chose in Sapphire when I was young, and I always loved Swampert's muddy water attack, so I went for him again for nostalgia's sake. Some of my absolute favourites from this region are Absol, Milotic, Aggron, Manectric, Mightyena, Swellow, Slowking, Gardevoir, Chiffre, Zangoose, Grumpig, Armaldo and Mawile. Let's not forget we have the Pikachu clones, Plusle and Minel, that I wish were more useful because admittedly I think they are cute as hell. And what about the legendaries, I hear you ask? Tam, you haven't already spent 47 years talking about them in this video. Tam, what are your thoughts on them? Well, if you insist, I think the legendary Pokemon in Emerald are pretty freaking cool. The trio are perfect, and no, I'm not talking about the Regis. Rayquaza, a big green dragon creature. Amazing. Kyogre, a massive blue whale monster. Outstanding. And Groudon, a huge red lizard thing. It's cool as hell. Latios and Latios are great additions, with my favourite being the red one, but the Regis leave a lot to be desired. They are cool, don't get me wrong, but I end up only ever getting them for collection's sake. The coolest one for me is maybe Registeel. Also, it's a bit of a letdown we don't get the chance to catch Deoxys here. It's one of my all-time favourite legendary Pokemon, and I had the defense one back in Leaf Green somehow. I just wish we were able to get it here. But if you play the remakes Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby, you can get it there without needing to go to an event or anything like that. And that's about it for the characters. So let's move on and discuss number 4, how the game performs. If you haven't noticed by now just how much the visuals have improved in this game compared to the last, then let me give you a few examples. This is Crystal, and this is Emerald. If you're still not convinced, let me point out a few of my favourite little details, starting with the basics. The colour. The roots, cities and seas of Hoenn look phenomenal. The colours are vibrant, each area has its own distinct feel and atmosphere, from the ash-covered grass on this route to the welcoming sunshine in Pelburg City. The entire region is just bursting with character and colours to match. We now have underwater areas where the trapped air in the grass releases as we swim through it. We have a dry, harsh desert where An unrelenting sandstorm constantly rages on. There's even rain now that puddles on the floor, and we can see a reflection in them as well as the clouds passing overhead. For a game released on the Game Boy Advance, this is by far one of the best examples of what could be done with the technology they had to work with. Every city feels different from the last, and they all have some reason to visit. There are beaches we can run around on and see our footprints trail behind us, or we can even just chill out with some old women in a hot spring. And the music is pretty well done also, with each track capturing the essence of every area perfectly. I can see why a lot of people consider Emerald to be their favourite Pokemon game, and I can certainly see arguments for why it might just be the best game in this series. On top of the environmental visuals, the 2D sprite work is phenomenal. Every Pokemon has their own unique animation when entering a battle, and we also have a little animation too. The animations for each move used in battle look 100 times better as well. With everything I've just mentioned and more crammed into a small GBA cartridge, there's bound to be some glitches and bugs. But again, just like Crystal and Yellow, I never found a single one. These games are generally extremely well polished, and that seems to be the standard for Pokemon games. And that'll never change. Right? There's far too many things to say and point out when it comes to this game's graphical improvements. And if I pointed them all out, this video would be twice as long. So I'm going to give it my seal of approval and just move on to the final part of the video and give my overall thoughts. In number 5, the conclusion. First of all, I'd like to say a quick thank you for sticking around this far into the video. I know this is a little longer than the last two, but it's just because the game deserves the attention. Pokemon Emerald was a complete breath of fresh air for me because I just played Yellow and Crystal back to back and I didn't really enjoy them as much as I hoped. And then I thought this was going to be more of the same, and I was quickly reminded that the third generation was a very special moment in Pokemon's history. I was at the perfect age when I played this game for the first time. I was already hooked by the franchise before I played it, but the Hoenn region dragged me in to the depths of the ocean, and I've been stuck here ever since. No matter what anyone says, I enjoyed this story. It's not perfect, but it's a good change of pace from the previous two. The story was fun, the visuals are great, and the characters and dialogue aren't too bad either. We have contests and even the Battle Frontier thing for people who enjoy the battling side of things. There's also a great thing I forgot to mention where the game actually makes you feel like you're gaining notoriety as you progress. People talk about a strong trainer who is working their way up the ranks. You do television interviews and you can later watch them in random people's houses. Simple little things that really make you feel like you're affecting the world around you and that what you're doing actually matters. There's a ton of content for you to dive into here, and I definitely recommend newcomers play this one. But if you're looking for a similar experience, there's always the remakes Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. And now we come to the important question. Was Pokemon Emerald an average experience? I'd say no. I actually think it's an above average experience. So for this one, I'm going to give it 4.5 Pokeballs out of 6. I don't think I'd change anything from this one. I honestly think it's great the way it is, and I'm quite excited about playing Pokemon Platinum when we get to it. So if you'd like to see me cover that game, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more average experiences. And remember, if you can, go outside sometimes. It's good for you. I'm MrTamtheHam, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.